Today I want to talk briefly about one of my favourite match fishing rods, a fantastic river float rod, possibly one of the best of all time. People will say, well, what about so and so, that's a better rod nowadays. But this rod is truly special, and they're so special that despite coming out originally in about 1993 and being on sale until, depending on stock in tackle shops, about the year 2000, by which time there was a later model, and then there were other versions that came out, and the main protagonist went on to found another make of rod that are also very special. But there's something very special about this rod, and it's not going to surprise you to know what it is, and I'm going to tell you why it's so special. It's a Normark rod, and Normark carbon rods turned up in either the very late 70s or very early 1980s. They had their professional series that came out during the 80s, and then they started to produce some very specialised match rods, very good rods. The Norboron was one of the early ones, very good. Not a rod that I ever bought. I did think about them. And then there were the first series of these special rods, the Avenger, the Titan and the Microlite, and I've got all three of those. Not every model in terms of length. I've got a 12-foot Microlite, a 13-foot Titan, a 13-foot Avenger, and that Avenger was my first Normark, and I've still got that rod. Fantastic rod for fishing a waggler on bigger waters where you can put a big waggler on, or fishing an Avon float. Okay with a stick, not brilliant for a stick. Nice light forgiving rod, but plenty of power for casting a big float. And then, like I say, in the early 90s a new incarnation came out, the 2000 series, and one of the first ones was the Titan 2000, which I got in 1991, which wasn't that long after it came out. I never got a Microlite 2000. I wouldn't mind fishing with one. It's not a rod I really need nowadays. But in 1998, after this rod had been out a while, I finally treated myself, along with a mate of mine, Terry. We both got from Chapman's Angling, Avenger 2000s, and that's what this rod is. It is tatty, it is absolutely hammered. The name on it, I doubt if you're going to read it. It's faded and worn. The Duplon is tatty, the cork is discoloured, got caked on ground bait there. The Duplon down at this end is scratched and cut. Long ago I replaced the plastic bung on the end, which weighs over half an ounce, with just a bit of plain cork that is tapered, and I think that's nicer. The rod balance is affected in a nice way, and I've put my trademark cork hood over the screw down Fuji fitting, and that means it's far more comfortable with a reel on there, and this screw fitting goes underneath the hood, so it's really nice. With that will work with my Shimano reels with a fairly short reel foot, or my Mitchell matches. It's got Fuji titanium SIC rings, which are excellent. I've had to replace one of them here with a different Fuji ring. I don't even know what it is, but it's a single leg one that I broke the foot off, and I've whipped one on. Not a fantastic job, but it's better than it was. One problem with these rods is that the tip, I'm going to have to be careful in here because we're in a confined space, is prone to breaking off, and this one has been broken twice. Once right on the eye, so it probably lost not much over 1/4 of an inch, and then it broke off a bit more, so it's probably over an inch missing on the very tip, which doesn't, it affects it a tiny bit, but to fish with it's fine. I'm going to put this down safely for a minute. I'm going to show you some action of using this rod and try and describe the great things about it. It's not light by today's standards. That particular example weighs probably fractionally less than it did new, because I've taken off that plastic bung, but I've added a bit of cork to it. But it's about 180 odd grams, which you'll have to work out for yourself, but we'll call it a nominal 6.5 ounces. And people will say, well, I can get an acolyte and it's 4.5 ounces, 4 3/4 ounces. It's quite a bit lighter, and it will feel lighter than that. That will feel a little bit heavier. But these rods, although the tip is a little bit fragile, the rest of the rod isn't. So you can lean into big fish with it with great confidence. It's not brilliant because it's the most powerful of the series. So the microlight was a very light rod that you could fish a pound mainline, 1.5 pound mainline, maybe up to a 2 pound mainline. The Titan is a bit more versatile. You can fish a 1.5 pound mainline, something I've often done, but probably best suited with a 2 pound, and up to a 2.5, maybe a 3 pound is a bit pushing it. This rod I would use with a 2 pound mainline, which probably in real terms will break at more like 2 3/4 pounds. 2 pound Maxima is something like 2 3/4 pound breaking strain. And some of the other lines are going to be similar. The sort of Dave Harrell match line is a 3 pound line that breaks at 3 pounds. So that is going to be a nice line to fish with. I've been using a line called Daiwa Justron. There's a 4 pound line that breaks at well over 3 pounds, nicely suited to that. And the strongest line I would use that would be a Daiwa Sensor in the 4 pound, which is really a 6 pound line. That's getting a bit brutal. And I've used, there was a version, well, there's a 3 pound sensor, but there was also a Daiwa Harrier line in 3 pound, and that's quite a nice line to fish with on this rod. So there's plenty of power there, and yet this fairly fine tip is nice and tippy. It's not a floppy rod. If you hold it out, it won't really show you, but there's a crispness to this rod. It's taut. That rod is totally crisp. There's no sort of floppiness, nothing there. You're instantly in control. There's always that tightness to the rod, and that's what makes it a brilliant stick float rod on rivers like the Avon or the Dorset Stour, where you could be hitting good roach, good dace, big chub. I've had barbel on this particular rod to around 7 pounds or so, and not just 1 or 2 bags of them. Good fish, and this rod has got stopping power. With that 4 pound line I've talked about, with sort of 4 pound hook lengths, I've had barbel trying to get through the bushes on the far bank, and this rod, you hold it, it bends and it holds them. It doesn't just keep bending, it absorbs and takes that punishment and then doles it back and then pulls out big barbel, big chub. Some of the fish that, just from memory, that I've had on it, one of the best float caught chub I've had, 6 pounds 7. I've had several tench over 6 pounds on it, fishing fairly light lines, sort of 2 pound main line, and a hook length not much less than that, with size 20 hooks. Certainly had some good carp on it. I don't know how big a carp I've had on it. I've had plenty of double figure carp on light float gear, so probably double figure carp. and as I said, barbel to around £7, and my best ever mullet at 610, which was caught in shallow water and put up an incredible fight. My mate Richard was taking photographs as opposed to filming that fight, and we know the fight lasted over 8 minutes, and I wasn't messing around. I was giving it absolutely everything this rod had, testing the gear to the absolute limits, because not that far away there's a big rush bed. The mullet knew exactly where it was, although it was about 50 yards away. All the mullet I've ever hooked in that spot, I've gone straight for that reed bed. Once or twice they've got in there, other times I've got them out. That £6 wasn't the only big mullet I've caught in that sort of area. I had £6 tench on it, something I videoed about a year ago. This is a really nice rod to fish with. And like I say, it's not the world's lightest, but come on, 6 and a bit ounces. If we go back nearly 50 years, I was using my Abu Mark 6, which weighed 14 3/4 ounces. I weighed about 7 stone wet through, no, a bit more than that, about 9 stone. And I could fish with an Abu Mark 6 for 6 hours, catching dace solid on a fast river. So to fish with a 6.5 ounce rod that's beautifully balanced, crisp, no floppiness, is wonderful. But this rod's more than just stick float fishing. It's good on a waggler. It will cast out, it will pick up the line. So although the fine tip's there, it picks it up, it absorbs, sort of cushions the strike nicely. It's terrific on a Avon float, where you're putting out quite a big float, cast underhand. The problem now is getting hold of one of these rods. Mint ones go for whatever people are prepared to pay for one. The original list price was around about £340, £350, but we were buying them for, I'm trying to think how much they were, about 240. They used to be about £100 off. Same with the Titan 2000. It's about what I pay for my Titan 2000. They were mainly available in the south of England, though, as I say, these came from Chapman Angling in Lincolnshire, I think it is. But some of my local shops certainly stocked Normark rods back in the day. Exeter Angling Centre obviously was the mecca for them, because Jeff Salisbury worked there and he was the man behind the design. He was the reason why they were so fantastic, and he designed this series of rods and then went on to found Carbotech. Now I've got a Carbotech number 2, which I think is fairly comparable to this rod, but it's a different action. It's designed for different things. It's fractionally lighter, the ringing is a little bit different, and it's a little bit more through action. I think its design owes something to the emergence of catching fairly small carp in matches on heavily stocked commercials, whereas this rod is more of it predates that period, so it's fine for catching small carp on commercials, but the Carbotech was a bit better for that. But this is a better river rod, and I'd still recommend it. So if you want one of these, you're going to have to take a lot of time and care, spend a lot of money, hundreds of pounds to buy one. Try and make sure it's mint condition. This one is not. Like I say, the varnish is under the right light, doesn't look very good. The handle's been hacked and knocked around, and it's lost a bit off the tip. When I said my mate Terry, he sorted out buying these rods, I've got his rod, and it's 25 years old, and he broke off the very last bit of the tip and put the eye back on it. So that one's only lost a quarter of an inch or so. And that one's, although I've done the handle with a hood type thing, is in far better condition than this one. It's not, the varnish hasn't gone bubbled and scratched. It still looks gorgeous. I know you can't have it. That's my spare if anything catastrophic happens to this one. So definitely a classic rod. The rod I use more and more on the river nowadays is a tri-cast John Allerton Premier Match in 13 foot. And I have done this to the handle. I've changed the screw up reel fit into a screw down one and put a hood on it, and it is 100 times nicer to fish with. And that feels about an ounce lighter than this rod. And it's got a very good playing action for fish, but it's not as good as this one for playing fish. Lovely to fish with. You can fish just as versatile with it. Stick floats, wagglers, even floats. And it's a rod I use a great deal. And the only thing I would say, just in passing, if you ever buy one of these tri-cast Allerton matches, from new especially, is check the eyes for varnish. The one I had, it took me 6 months to finally sort the eyes out, and I'm not the only person who said this. Brilliant rods, but someone was a bit sloppy with the resin, and some of the eyes had a resin residue in there, and it was hard to get rid of. It wasn't soft polyurethane varnish. It was one of these epoxy resin type things, and it took a lot of hard work and perseverance to get rid of all of it out of all of the eyes, despite using very sharp craft knives to do that. I think that's all I can say about this rod. I've shown you a few action shots along the way, and good luck with finding one. But if you ever do, don't just stick it in a rod bag in a corner and, oh, it's precious, it's too precious to fish with. Get out and fish with it. These rods were made to catch fish, catch lots of fish, lots of big fish, fish to remember, fish to enjoy catching. They're made for fish catching. Someone might say, I've had one 25 years and it's mint. It's never been used, never caught any fish. I don't see the point. They just fish with it, which means I ought to get out the one that belonged to my mate and have a good go with that one soon. Until next time, goodbye for now.